I'd like to make a toast to my wife, Aubrey, the best mistake I ever profited from. The room erupted in laughter. I felt the blood drain from my face. There I was, on my 35th birthday, surrounded by people I used to trust, dressed in a silk blue gown I had chosen so carefully that morning. I had hoped it would be a celebration of love, partnership, and everything Trent and I had built together over the past 7 years. Instead, it became the stage for my public humiliation. Trent stood confidently at the head of the long banquet table, champagne glass raised, that smug smirk plastered across his face. "Really, guys," he continued, chuckling as he gestured toward me. "She was just supposed to be a silent partner. You know, a pretty little investment. But hey, some accidents turn out profitable." The laughter grew louder. Jenna, my younger cousin, leaned into Trent and whispered something that made them both burst out laughing. I stared at her hand resting on his arm and felt bile rise in my throat. That's when I knew. The rumors I had pushed to the back of my mind for months, the late nights, the sudden interest Trent took in mentoring Jenna's startup, all of it was real. And now he was mocking me with it, in public. Let me back up a little. My name is Aubrey Langford. I used to teach mechanical engineering at a state university. 8 years ago, I met Trent at a tech conference in Austin. He was charming, broke, and full of vision. He talked about building a startup that would disrupt the energy space, but couldn't even afford the flight back home. I loaned him money. Then I invested. Then I fell in love. When we got married, I gave up my tenure-track position to help him run the company full-time. I built the foundation, designed the core system, handled early investors, negotiated our first licensing deals. But as soon as the company hit Series B funding, I started getting pushed aside. "You're better at back-end stuff," Trent would say. "Let me handle the board, the vision, the spotlight." Before I knew it, I had no title, no credit, and no voice in the company I helped build. But I stayed quiet. I convinced myself it was temporary, that being part of something bigger mattered more than recognition. Then came Jenna. She moved into our guest house temporarily after a bad breakup. At least, that's what she told me. In hindsight, I think Trent saw his opportunity the moment she arrived. They started working late on her pitch deck, having strategy dinners I wasn't invited to. And when I confronted Trent, he laughed it off. "You're paranoid," he said. "She's your cousin, for God's sake." So I told myself I was overthinking it, that I was being dramatic. That's what he always said when I challenged him. But tonight he stood in front of our closest friends, my colleagues, my family, and called me a mistake, an investment, a joke. That's when it clicked. Trent hadn't just excluded me, he had erased me. He had taken everything I gave him, my savings, my time, my expertise, and spun a narrative where I was the helpless tag-along wife, lucky to be kept around. My hands trembled under the table, but I smiled. I smiled so wide it hurt. Because in that moment, I realized something else. Trent had no idea what I had done 6 months ago. He had no idea I had discovered the legal loophole in our company charter. He had no idea I had reactivated my shares. And he definitely had no idea what Clause 17 meant, because he never bothered to read the updated documents I had slipped into his stack of routine contracts. I turned to the server and nodded. He handed me my phone. I opened my encrypted app. There it was, glowing softly. "Activate Clause 17. I hit send. The moment I pressed Activate Clause 17, my pulse steadied. For the first time in years, I felt control return to my fingertips, not the illusion of it Trent gave me when he wanted to keep me quiet, but real control. I watched him laugh at his own cruel joke, arms draped around Jenna like she was some trophy he'd earned after disposing of the starter wife. The guests chuckled awkwardly, most not knowing where to look. My aunt shifted uncomfortably in her seat. My dad avoided eye contact. Only my best friend Danielle, seated far from the center, caught my eye and gave me a barely noticeable nod. She knew, at least part of it, but Trent didn't. He didn't know that 6 months ago, I hired a quiet corporate attorney named Leslie Wong. She's not flashy, not the kind of lawyer who brags on LinkedIn, but she reads contracts like I used to read code, line by line, word by word. That's how we found it. Buried deep in our original articles of incorporation, in the version I drafted before Trent's marketing team rewrote everything, was Clause 17. It stated that in the event of a hostile removal of a founding partner, without board consensus, that partner could activate temporary executive privileges for 72 hours, enough time to conduct an emergency review of the company's practices and present findings to shareholders. In short, I could walk back through the front doors of the company he thought he kicked me out of, as interim CEO. But that's not what makes people angry when I tell them this story. What makes people furious, what made me furious, is the years it took for me to realize that Trent never saw me as a partner to begin with. After I left the university, I worked for free for the first 2 years of our startup. He said money was tight. I believed him. I coded through the night. I met with vendors. I even taught myself tax law so we wouldn't have to hire an expensive CPA. He called me his rock in public. Behind closed doors, I was too intense, too bookish, not the face investors want. The final insult was last summer. I found a pitch deck on his desktop, one he'd presented to new investors. My name was nowhere on it, not in the team slide, not in the founding story. He'd rewritten our origin as his vision, his sweat, and his risk. He called me, in writing, a family supporter. That night, I confronted him. He laughed. "Why are you acting like this is a betrayal?" he said, sipping from the scotch I bought him for his birthday. "You're not the one taking meetings. You're not charming VCs. You don't get how business works, Aubrey. You're an engineer who got lucky marrying me." I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just walked upstairs and texted Leslie. From that night forward, I stopped being his wife in private. I became his shadow. Every call he took on speaker, I documented it. Every contract he signed without reading, I made copies. Every strategy meeting with Jenna, I logged time, location, and conversations. He never suspected, because I smiled when I needed to. I asked harmless questions. I played dumb. And the dumber I acted, the more careless he became. Back at the birthday dinner, just as the main course arrived, Trent's phone buzzed. He checked it, frowned, and tapped rapidly. Then again. Then he froze. I watched his smirk fade like mist. He leaned into Jenna and whispered something. She stiffened. He stood, mumbled an excuse about needing to take a call, and left the room. 3 minutes later, Danielle's phone buzzed. Then my dad's. Then 3 investors seated to Trent's left. One by one, they opened a secure message from the company's legal department. Subject: Emergency notification. Temporary change in leadership. I could feel the confusion ripple like a wave across the table. Danielle gasped. My dad turned to me, stunned. Jenna's phone buzzed too. She grabbed it with a trembling hand. Then her face turned white. "Trent just texted me," she muttered, standing up. "He says you can't do this, that he's locked out of the company dashboard." I folded my napkin and stood, my hands calm, my voice even. "Oh, I can." And I just did. Her eyes narrowed. "You're bluffing." But I wasn't. And the proof walked through the restaurant doors, right then. Leslie Wong, in a sharp navy suit, holding a leather briefcase and flanked by a junior associate. She smiled calmly, scanning the room. "I believe you all received our update," she said, her voice polite but firm. "Ms. Langford is now acting CEO. Per the reinstatement clause." Jenna sat down hard in her chair. Leslie approached me, leaned in, and whispered, "Trent's trying to access the funds. He doesn't know you froze the primary accounts." I nodded, my gaze fixed on the exit. Because in that moment, I knew Trent wasn't just losing control. He was about to lose everything. By the time Trent came storming back into the restaurant, his face was flushed with panic. I was mid-conversation with 2 investors, he'd spent the last 2 years whining and dining. One of them, Mr. Halverson, was scrolling through the leadership update on his phone, while the other was already texting someone furiously. Trent's eyes scanned the room and locked on me like I'd just stolen his oxygen. "What the hell did you do, Aubrey?" he hissed, gripping the back of an empty chair. Leslie didn't even flinch. She turned, handed him a sealed envelope, and said evenly, "Notice of temporary reinstatement under Clause 17, as filed with the board. Your access to company systems has been restricted pending investigation." Trent tore the envelope open, scanned the first few lines, then looked up, his voice low and venomous. "You're insane! This isn't how this works. You don't even understand what you're doing." That's when I stood, slowly, calmly. "No, Trent," I said. "You don't understand. You were so sure I wasn't smart enough, that I was too gentle, too trusting, that I'd never see it coming." He leaned in. "You just blew up your own life. Everything we built—" "No," I interrupted. "Everything I built. You just put your name on it." The tension in the room had shifted completely. Conversations had quieted. Forks hovered midair. Even Jenna had slid back in her chair, clearly regretting every smirk she'd ever given me. Then Trent did something I'll never forget. He laughed, loud, cruel, desperate. "You think you've won? This is a joke. The board won't back you. You think I didn't protect myself? You're cute, Aubrey, but not dangerous. Just wait until Monday morning." Leslie smiled, the kind of smile that says, "You really shouldn't have said that." "That's the thing," she said sweetly. "You won't have to wait until Monday." She handed him another document. "This is a formal request for a forensic audit. Effective immediately. We've already begun." Trent's jaw clenched. "Aubrey," he said under his breath, "you don't want to do this. You'll expose everything." "That's the idea," I said. I didn't flinch as he slammed his fist onto the table. Wine glasses trembled. "You don't know what you're dealing with," he snapped. "Actually, I do," I replied, like how the Henderson invoices were duplicated across 4 shell companies, or how you routed ad spend through Jenna's startup, which, by the way, hasn't launched a single product. Jenna's eyes widened in horror. "You told me that was legal," she muttered. Trent spun on her. "Shut up, not now." Too late. "I have copies of those invoices," I said, reaching into my bag. "Dated, signed, and traced to your Cayman account." Someone near the end of the table gasped. But the real twist? That hadn't even started yet. Because while Trent was focused on me, flailing to hold on to his crumbling image, he hadn't noticed what I dropped into the group chat 15 minutes earlier. A single PDF. Titled, "Confidential, Trent's NDA with Jenna, signed." I watched as one phone lit up, then another. Confusion, shock, disgust. Mr. Halverson read aloud. "Termination of relationship conditional on non-disclosure of financial arrangements. Quarterly payment of $30,000. Wait, what is this?" Jenna's face turned scarlet. "You told me no one would ever see that," she whispered, voice shaking. Trent froze. Someone dropped a fork. Another investor stood abruptly, his chair screeching against the tile. "You paid her to keep quiet?" he asked, voice sharp. "About what, Trent?" I leaned forward. "About using her company to launder the investor funds," I said clearly. Silence. Dead, frozen silence. Trent opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Then Jenna stood, hands trembling, voice shaking. "He said it would help both of us," she said softly. "That no one would get hurt. That you were too busy reading books to ever notice." Every pair of eyes in the room turned back to Trent. And for the first time in our marriage, I saw it. Fear. The kind that comes when a man finally realizes he's been outplayed. Comment the number 2 if you want to see how Trent tries to fight back. And what happens when the FBI gets involved. When Trent stormed out of the restaurant that night, I knew exactly where he was going. Straight to the office. He thought he could still outmaneuver me, That if he moved fast enough, deleted a few files, scared a few employees, pulled some strings, he could shut this down before it caught fire. But what he didn't know was, it was already burning. I had been laying this groundwork for months. While he drank overpriced whiskey with investors, I'd been meeting with forensic accountants under the guise of consulting on a novel. While he mocked my book clubs, I was working with a cybersecurity firm to mirror our company servers off-site. Every file, every invoice, every voice memo I recorded when he thought I was just making tea. So when Trent burst into the office that night and discovered that his login credentials were disabled and the servers were locked behind two-factor authentication linked to my devices, he lost it. He called me 16 times in the span of 1 hour. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I was sitting in Leslie's office downtown, sipping chamomile tea while she calmly reviewed the email we had just sent to the entire board of directors. Subject line: Formal request for emergency shareholder vote, CEO misconduct. Attached were the NDA, the forged invoices, the Cayman transfers, Jenna's signed testimony, and a 32-page audit report that documented every misappropriated dollar. And in case any of them hesitated, we included the pre-drafted press release, already approved by a crisis management firm, ready to go public within minutes. By midnight, 3 board members had already called us. 2 were in shock. 1 was furious, but none of them defended Trent. Leslie smiled. "They've seen enough," she said. "The vote happens in the morning." Still, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying all the ways I had let him get away with this for so long. All the nights I'd made excuses for him. All the times he called me emotional when I asked simple questions about missing money or why Jenna had an access badge to our private workspace. He used to call me his conscience. Ironic, really, because now I was the reason he was about to lose everything. The next morning, I arrived at the office just after 8 a.m. The shareholder vote was scheduled for 10. I walked past the receptionist, through the glass doors, and into the boardroom like I belonged there, because I did. The room was silent when I entered. 10 chairs, 9 of them filled. The 10th, Trent's, was empty, until the doors flew open behind me. He walked in like a storm, tie loosened, eyes bloodshot, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. But when he saw me sitting at the head of the table, his face twisted with rage. "You don't know what you're doing," he growled. "You keep saying that," I replied, "but somehow I keep doing it anyway." The vote took 7 minutes, 8 in favor, 1 abstained. Motion passed. Trent was removed as CEO, effective immediately. He stood there stunned. "You can't do this." Leslie stood beside me, handing him the paperwork. "It's done." He reached for it, then paused. His eyes narrowed, and suddenly the smugness returned. "You forgot something," he said, lips curling into a sneer. "The vesting clause. I still own 49%. You can't move a dime without my approval." I didn't look away. "I'm glad you brought that up," I said, sliding a manila folder across the table. He opened it, then froze. Because inside was a signed transfer agreement, dated 3 months ago, where Trent had unknowingly sold 20% of his shares to a holding company. My holding company, buried in a pile of documents I'd asked him to sign for the PR team, right after one of his many late-night drinks. He blinked. "No, this isn't real. You tricked me." "You didn't read it," I said simply. "You never did." He shook his head, now visibly shaking. "That's illegal. That's fraud." "No," Leslie said. "It's perfectly legal. You signed it sober, and we have the footage." "What footage?" I pulled out my phone. Hit play. There he was, on screen, signing the papers, laughing. "You're lucky you married someone who still cares about your image," he slurred. The room went dead quiet. Then Halverson, the lead investor, leaned back in his chair and said flatly, "Looks like you're down to 29%, Trent." The FBI showed up less than a week later. 2 agents. Black suits. Quiet voices. They didn't cause a scene. They didn't have to. Trent had already done that for them. They met him in the lobby of the office building he no longer had access to. I wasn't there when they put the cuffs on him. I didn't need to be. I'd already seen enough of him trying to talk his way out of things. But I was there when they raided his home office. I watched from the sidewalk, arms folded, as agents carried out boxes of documents, servers, hard drives. One of them looked up at me and gave a slight nod. Respectful, even impressed. He didn't say it out loud, but I could feel it. They had everything they needed. Trent's charges included wire fraud, securities fraud, tax evasion, and obstruction. Each count stacked on top of the last like bricks closing in around him. His lawyer quit after the indictment was unsealed. Jenna ghosted him entirely. Her last message to me was a single sentence. I didn't know what he really was. I do now. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The company restructured under new leadership, mine. I didn't keep the CEO title. I didn't need to. I appointed a capable team, put my name where it belonged, as founder, and focused on rebuilding what mattered. Integrity, transparency, and creating something that couldn't be stolen by a man who thought charisma was more valuable than character. The press had a field day. Headlines like, Tech Bro dethroned by quiet co-founder. She was the brains, he was the ego, guess who's left standing? And my favorite, the silent wife who outplayed everyone. But I didn't do it for the headlines. I did it because I couldn't look in the mirror another day, knowing that I had let him rewrite the story of my life. 3 months after the arrest, I stood in front of a packed auditorium at a Women in Tech conference. My keynote wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming your narrative. Near the end, I held up the original, annotated articles of incorporation I had printed from my backup drive. Clause 17 circled in red. This is how it started, I told them. Not with rage, not with screaming. Just a woman reading what no one else bothered to. The applause nearly shook the room, but the real closure came a week later. I received a letter from Trent. Not from jail. His lawyers had convinced the judge to let him stay out on bond while awaiting trial, but the desperation still bled through the paper. He said he didn't understand how I could smile at him all those years while secretly preparing to destroy him. I didn't respond. Because I didn't destroy him. He did that all by himself. I just made sure he didn't take me down with him. The last time I saw him in person was in the courtroom at his pretrial hearing. He looked thinner, older, like the weight of everything had finally settled on him. Our eyes met. Just briefly. And for once, he didn't look smug. He didn't look furious. He looked hollow. When the judge read out the potential sentence if convicted, up to 25 years, he dropped his head. Afterward, as I walked out into the morning sun, Leslie turned to me and asked, "Do you feel like you won?" I thought about it for a long second. Then I answered honestly, I feel like I finally finished the story he tried to steal from me. That night, I sat at my desk, alone, peaceful, powerful. I opened a fresh page of my manuscript and wrote the first line of the final chapter. She wasn't the villain in his downfall. She was the author of her own freedom. And this time, I didn't need his signature to make it real. Comment the number 9 if you felt that ending and want to see more stories of quiet women taking back their power. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for the next one.